Hello and welcome to part 3 of our 4-part series on our memory and learning practices at Sandbox Learning. My name is Jesse Whelan. I'm the founder and director of learning at Sandbox Learning. And today we're going to talk about spaced repetition. So spaced repetition is, as it sounds, spacing things out of time over time, as opposed to massed repetition, which is cramming. So let's talk about why this is important. Now, think about when you're learning something. Just because you spend a bunch of time, hours, let's say, learning something, doesn't mean you're going to hold on to that information forever. You're going to actually start forgetting over time. Think about it. You might have learned someone's name or a phone number, or you've been sitting in a lecture and you might remember it now, but come a couple of weeks later, it's gone. So over 100 years ago, a guy by the name of Ebbinghaus was keen on actually trying to get a little bit more precise about the learning. So what he did is he created a kind of a fake language, taught it to himself, and then tested himself over different periods of time to see how much he would remember. And the results of that are along this curve, and it's been studied a lot, repeated many, many times, and is a very robust finding. But what you may notice about this curve is if you look at the x-axis, it's not uniform. When we actually standardize the curve, you see that the drop-off is really dramatic. Now, this will depend on the particular type of information. Things that are new, you're going to forget more quickly. Things that are a little closer to what you already know, you're going to remember because you've got better context for that. But in general, after an hour, you'll forget roughly 50% of what you've just learned. And after kind of a day, you'll have forgotten about 70%. So the problem with this is if you're continually kind of learning just to forget, learn something new, just forget, learn something new, just forget, you're spending so much time investing in learning only to forget it. There has to be a much better way. The good news is that using a spaced approach helps dramatically to slow down learning decay. And the reason is every time you do a new effective study program, which involves retrieval practice, as we spoke about in the last video, you're helping to strengthen those connections in the brain to that knowledge. So every time you're trying to think, okay, what do I need to do? What's that bit of information or that skill? It becomes quicker and easier for your brain to locate that information. What we say here, if you look on the graph, the first time you do it, you learn something, which is the orange kind of line, you're going to have this really quick decay. But if, for example, after a day, you do another study session, you're going to your memory of it is going to go up, but even more so than that, along the green line, it's going to slow down. You can then wait another few days before doing another study session, goes back up and slows down even more along the yellow. We go again and again and again, and it slows down. Now, the reason why this is so much more effective than cramming, regardless of how much you cram, you're never going to get beyond 100%. And the rate of forgetting depends not on the amount of time you're spending, but the number of sessions, essentially. So if you can spread the same amount of time over more and more sessions, you're going to have more strengthening happening in your brain rather than just cramming it all in one go. It's similar to thinking of your brain as a muscle. If you tried to do lots and lots, 10, 12 hours of exercise all in one day and then kind of nothing, not only will you be in severe amount of pain if you haven't done it for a long time, you'll actually not hold onto those physical benefits for that long. Way better to spread it out, that exercise, over a number of days. As I said before, here's an example of what it might be. Now, these numbers are purely illustrative. Don't get caught up on particular things. But the idea is, imagine you're going to spend 4 hours studying for a particular subject. You've got a test coming up. Well, if you do it all in one cram session, you you may not do so well, you get a C. It's okay. Instead, imagine breaking that into 4 lots of 1 hour, for example. Because you're doing 4 of these study sessions and spreading it out, instead of it dropping off really quickly, you're going to kind of go up that curve like we saw. Even better is if you can break it up into 8. You do it over many weeks rather than the night before, and you'll remember that information much better, not only in a week's time, but in a month's time, 6 months' time. For those of you, particularly year 12, heading towards the HSC or some other final exams, you don't want to just focus on your test now. You're going to need all that information in the future. So just because you learn something in term 1, you don't want to forget it all just to have to relearn it later. So how do you actually implement spaced repetition? Well, the first most effective way is after the end of every lesson, session, lecture, what come, you've just kind of got all this information, you're up the top of your learning, and as soon as that, you're going to start forgetting it very, very quickly. If you could spend 1 or 2 minutes at the end of every class just writing down, recalling from your brain what you remember, that automatically is an extra little session and will start making the learning decay slower. The second one is you want to spread your study across multiple shorter sessions. Don't plan to do a big cram session the night before. Break it up into those sessions across the week. Third one, review old concepts periodically. Just because a particular topic or a term has finished doesn't mean you can just forget about it until later. You want to constantly do little bits over time. And finally, there's another cool method involving flashcards called the Leitner method that makes this way more organized, because it's really difficult to remember where you are, what topic you've done, should you redo it. So the Leitner flashcard system is one way of helping you. Also, there's kind of automated software. We build into our own adapted software for those of you using it, particularly for maths. That's a way that automatically will remind you based on it's tracking where you are in your forgetting curves and saying, hey, it's time to redo this topic. So that's it for spaced repetition. Stay tuned for our final talk of the series, which is on interleaved or mixed practice. Thank you so much.